If nobody talks about you, then you are nobody. Then you are nobody. Remember, child, everybody get their problem for head.
Today, I'm going to talk about spiritual dis-ease. Okay. Um, disease of the spirit. We know that everything that manifests in the physical world has a spiritual origin. Okay. So before you manifested in the flesh, you resided in the spirit world. Your parents may have prayed for a child, and then you were conjured and called into this realm. Everything begins with a thought, everything begins in spirit. And so our dysfunction that we experience in the physical realm, dysfunction, disorder, dis-ease, always has a spiritual origin. Even when we're talking about physically, even when we're talking about you having a toothache, well, yeah, you may have a toothache because of a cavity, because of decay, and that decay may be caused from eating too much sugar, but that craving that you might have for sugar, or that addiction that one might have for sugar, has a spiritual component to it. So even a cavity has a spiritual source or start. Okay. Y'all kind of follow what I'm saying? So every disease has a spiritual beginning. So we're going to just talk about four very common spiritual diseases or ailments today, because these are things that plague us as individuals and particularly as a community when we talk about descendants of the diaspora. Okay. So the first one, and I'm not only going to talk about spiritual dis-ease, but I'm going to talk about ways we can begin to heal that. The first one is anger. Do y'all know that anger is a dis-ease? Anger is a dis-ease because and so it's funny, I told my fiance this morning what I was going to be talking about, and I told him that I was going to be talking about spiritual disease, and the first one is anger. And he said, oh yeah, that's a lack of control. That's when you lose control. That is the disease. And it is, because when we are balanced and fully in control of ourselves, we don't get angry. Remember, the purpose, the goal of Ifa, of one who lives a life according to Isheshe, or the tradition, the goal of that is Iwa Pele, which is good and balanced character, a narrow road that we walk, okay, that is going to keep us in absolute alignment with our unique set of blessings and gifts that are already ordained for us. Is when we veer from that path that we experience dis-ease, disorder, dysfunction. Okay. And so and thank you guys who are already sending donations. So when we experience spiritual dis-ease, then we know that we have lost.
The last thing we heard was when you first started talking about spiritual dis-ease, and you were talking about anger and how it comes from a lack of control.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. So anger can either, as when it is expressed as dis-ease, it can either be, and so this is important, you guys, because anger can either be expressed or it can be repressed. And both of these are ways that this dis-ease will show up in our life. You can be angry and you can be punching holes in walls and knocking shit over and cussing people out and picking fights and just be mad. And everybody knows, like, wow, that person is really angry. What's wrong with them? Or they get angry really quickly. But anger, and so that's an obvious form of anger. And when we see people who act like that, people who lose control, what do we think? They're crazy, right? We know they're sick. We know that this is a sickness, but we go through life acting like it's not when it's appearing within us. We judge other people for it, and we can say that another person has an anger problem, or they crazy, or they snap, crackle, and pop, or however you refer to it. But when we're dealing with the anger within ourselves, repressed anger, we don't recognize it the same way. We don't recognize that it too is a dis-ease. Repressed anger will fester. Repressed anger causes much more problems than the explosive anger in reality. And so what we need to do is learn how to release anger. Okay, we need to learn how to release those things that are making us angry, release those emotions that lead to anger. And so I'm going to give you a few strategies for how to do that. You can release, you need to start by knowing that you have to release repressed emotions. When we have energy, particularly energy that doesn't serve us well, and it settles in our body, that stagnation becomes a point of dis-ease in the body that will later and can later become a place of physical disease. Things like tumors can grow there, or you can have all kinds of, malfunctions associated with those energetic centers in the body where that negative energy has settled. So you want to make sure that you are on the regular basis releasing repressed emotions. One of the ways to do that is to understand that the truth is always sweet, no matter how bitter. I'll repeat that. The truth is always sweet, no matter how bitter. So no matter how unappealing a fact may be, no matter how much it might sting or hurt, no matter unhappy it may make you for that moment, it's always better to know the truth about something than it is to live a lie. And so we accept our truth when things are revealed to us that are not happy, that are not pleasant. We praise God anyway, right? Because we know that that truth is a gift and we accept it. We don't repress it. We don't want to stay in the darkness of our own imagination. I'm going to be talking about imagination a lot today because that's where a lot of us live. And that's why we wonder why things go wrong in our life. But I'm going to stay on topic right now and talk about releasing. So one of the ways that we can release negative energy, one of the ways we can release repressed emotions is just embracing the truth. Understanding, Ayanna Van Zandt will say, call a thing a thing. If you've been abused in the past, or if you're being abused, if someone speaks to you in an abusive manner, for example, call it what it is. Don't sit there tight-faced and crying on the inside while this person berates you, because that dis-ease will settle in your body. And for women, it's going to settle in your heart. It's going to settle in your breast. It's going to settle in your womb. It's going to settle in those places that make you female, that make you feminine. And that's where you will later have physical ailments if you don't deal with the emotional dis-ease that's caused by instances of, for example, allowing someone to or being victim of abuse. So instead of addressing the abuse and calling out the abuser and saying, you're abusing me, I don't like the way you're speaking to me, I won't tolerate the way you're speaking to me, we just overlook it. Oh, that's just how he is, girl. That's just how he talk. But you dying on the inside, your heart is breaking because this man that you love is talking to you like a dog, but you don't want to call it what it is. Or you're going out of your way, making yourself available for a family member. Let's even call it a parent, because there's so many toxic parent-child relationships, not just in our community, in the world, but particularly in Black communities where we're not allowed to speak on it, right? So let's say you're making yourself financially available, you're making yourself available with time, whatever, for a parent, and they're ungrateful. That's abuse. And that breaks your heart, but you keep doing it anyway because you feel that you're obligated to do so. And you may be, but you don't speak on it. You don't call it out. You don't address it. These are small deaths that we die. Call it what it is. Call a thing, as Ayanna would say. The truth is always sweet. Just say it. Recognize it. Don't allow that thing to live in your body rent-free, because it's not rent-free. It's eating you from the inside out. repressed truth becomes polluted truth. The longer we hold something in or dumb it down or bury it, it becomes polluted, meaning we can no longer see it for what it really is. So what we may have initially known was abuse, now we've called it other things. We've given it a new name, a new identity, so that we can hold on to it. That's the sick part. That's the sick part, is that we want the sickness. It's like, leave me alone with my demons. Rather than release this thing that's hurting me, that injured me, rather than give it away and get it out of me, I'll just let it stay there, burrowing a hole in my heart, but I'll call it something else to make it palatable. That sounds crazy, doesn't it? Like if you stepped on a piece of glass and you got a piece of glass in your foot, you're going to get it out. You get a splinter in your finger, you're going to go get a safety pin and you're going to get it out. You're not going to rest until you get that splinter out of your finger, because it doesn't belong there and it doesn't serve you well and it fucking hurts. You're going to get the splinter out of your finger, but you'll let abuse, you'll let pain, resentment sit in your body and rot. Can anybody hear me?
You preaching, Ia, you preaching.
Okay.
So repressed truth becomes polluted truth, y'all. The longer we hold on to it, the longer we don't address it, the more it transforms. The more we forget what it really is, the more we begin to believe the lies that we tell ourselves, which are the worst kind of lie. So when we feel anger, we need to address it. This is something that's so important for Black women because, for one, we have a reputation now in pop culture of being the angry Black woman. We got some shit to be mad about, but we're not nearly as angry as we need to be. Because if we were truly angry, because anger actually teaches us to address the truth. Anger is like pain, okay? When something hurts, it's your body's way of letting you know that something is wrong. When you are angry, it is your emotional body crying out and letting you know that something is off balance. So when you feel yourself being angry or getting triggered, you need to stop and examine what's happening right now. Why do I feel like this? What is this? We need to address it. But as Black women, because we have this stereotype, a lot of times we repress it. As proper Southern women, when we get mad as hell about something that we may have every right to be mad about, we repress it because we don't want to act a fool in public. We don't want to act crazy at the job. We don't want to lose our mind on these kids. We don't want to address whatever it is that's making the emotional body cry out in pain, which is what anger is, okay? Anger is actually a last resort for the body. And I'm talking about the spiritual body now. Anger is the last resort. Before you get angry, you get irritated. Before you get angry, you get confused. Like, what the hell? How many times have you been in a situation and right before you snap, you like, wait a minute, what just happened? Confusion precedes anger. Discomfort. That's not cool with me. I'm not feeling this. That precedes anger. The intuition, ding, 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 that nigga crazy. That precedes anger. By the time you get mad enough to explode and express anger, you've already known that there was an issue. So, to avoid, because you should never get to the point where you have to even experience anger. Because why, again, anger is a lack of balance. So we need to pay attention to those things that happen to us and in us before the anger comes. Pay attention to those moments of confusion. If you don't know what is going on, you need to be the fuck still until you figure it out. Like, wait a minute, what just happened? What did she say to me? Or what just happened? Sit still and figure it out. Because if you don't, if you brush over it, if you move past it, if you push it down and repress it, it's going to come back in a way that's not going to serve you or anybody else well, because it's imbalance. Okay? Listen to your intuition. That's the big thing, especially as melanated women. You will hear within you way before you see what's coming, if only you would listen. That's why it's important to have a good relationship with your ancestors. They will warn you. They will alert you to patterns of poor behavior, poor decision making. They will call you out on this. You'll see it in your meditations. You'll see it in your visions. You will know that you need to stop doing X, Y, and Z because you would have already been told. But if we don't listen to our ancestors, if we don't have a relationship that allows us to hear from them or to plug into them, then we will miss that guidance as well. And lastly, but most importantly, firstly, is Ori, your head. Again, y'all worry about the wrong things. People worried about which Orisha walks with you. Worry about your Ori, your head. Orisha means owner of the head. You got to make sure the head is right first. Make sure you're listening to your higher self. Make sure you're honoring yourself. Make sure you're okay with what is happening to you and around you at all times. That is your responsibility. It's not my responsibility to treat you well. It's your responsibility to make sure that I do, and to deprive me of your presence until such time as I can.
Ashe.
That's your responsibility. The prayer we just prayed, or do not let me be disrespected by anyone. That is a real, true, and living prayer. It's 10,000 years old. It's part of the Ifa corpus. Do not let me be disrespected by anyone, Ori. Our ancestors said this, they recorded this, they shared it generation after generation. Ori, it's your job to make sure that I'm okay at all times. But if you don't listen to your Ori, if you're around here dripping in the leke and leaving offerings for this one and that one, and waiting for somebody outside of yourself to save you and protect you, you are always going to be angry, because you're always going to be off balance, because you're going to be letting shit happen to you that never would have happened to you if you would have only listened to your Ori in the beginning.
Ashe.
Remember, spirit speaks to you, through you, as you. So if you can't hear that teeny tiny voice, if you can't hear yourself talking to yourself, then you're not doing it right. You need to continue to pray, and you need to continue to meditate. So anger is an imbalance that we can prevent. We can prevent this disease from ever being part of our reality if only we acknowledge the truth, follow our intuition, listen to the advice and urgings of the ancestors and Ori. Okay? You also want to begin to uncover where the anger is actually coming from, where you need healing. You need to acknowledge your triggers. Acknowledge your triggers. You know, for some women, you know, it may be the word bitch. If a man calls you a bitch, you're going to absolutely, your head will spin around. Why? Why is that? Not that it's wrong, but know why that's a trigger for you. For some people, it may be being interrupted when they're speaking. You interrupt me 2 or 3 times, forget the conversation. I'm done with it. I ain't talking to you no more because you have disrespected me. But why? Why is that such a trigger for you? Is it because you grew up feeling like you weren't heard? Is it a trigger for you because you never feel like you get to fully express yourself? Why is it a trigger? Okay, so you need to start paying attention to when you are triggered to understand where the healing needs to happen. Don't just be like, oh, I get mad quick. Y'all know I'll snap. No, why are you snapping? What is making you snap? That's the source of the disease. That's where we need to find the root of it so we can begin to cut it out. Y'all understand what I'm saying? Don't just accept, oh, I got a bad temper. A lot of us have bad tempers. And remember, if the Orisha are with you, not because of what you have and who you are, but because of what you need. So a lot of times people will be like, oh yeah, you know, I'm a child of Shango, I got a real hot temper. That's not how it works. Shango is not with you because you have, well, Shango could be with you because you have a bad temper, but there are aspects of Shango that can actually assist you with those very things that we think are a mark of the Orisha. Does that make sense? I'm not going to talk too much about that because that's actually like another course, but you need to find out why you're being triggered and where the seat of that disease is. When you feel anger, you want to invite the spirits of healing and transformation in. Okay? For my priestesses, y'all know that would be Oshun, that would be Oya. When you feel yourself about to blow, when you feel it creeping up your spine, you want to call on Oshun. You want to call on Oya. And these are the deities that you want to continue to work with as you are healing these parts of your experience, these parts of your body, of your heart. And you will begin to know that you have healed when your triggers arise and you're not responding to them in the same way. When someone can interrupt you and you can just voluntarily, of your own volition, without any emotion, just stop talking and just let them talk. Obviously, you know, what they have to say, their ego is telling them is so much more important that they can't share the space with me. So I'm just going to sit here and freshen up my lipstick and let them have the floor. I'm gonna let them talk. When you can do that, instead of cussing somebody out for interrupting you or putting your purse on your shoulder and walking out of the room since you don't want to listen anyway. You get what I'm saying? When you can react in that way, then you'll know that the healing has begun. Okay, so pay attention to your triggers because they will show you where the dis-ease is and track your progress. And that's why it's important to journal, okay? Complain. Complain to clarify. When something is bothering you, speak about it. Speak on it. Like Ayanla says, call a thing a thing. Like I think it's the Migos. Who is it? One of those group rappers say, I won't know how you feel till you tell me. I won't know how you feel until you tell me. I won't. So tell me, complain. If I'm doing something to you that you don't like, that bothers you, tell me. If something is happening to you that doesn't feel right, say it. Complain. Don't repress. We're no longer repressing things. We're not putting anything into our bodies. We're not keeping anything in our bodies that don't serve us. So you're not going to leave me with this fucked up feeling. I'm going to tell you right now how I feel about this, because I'm not going home feeling like this. I'm not going to sleep tonight feeling like this. You get what I'm saying? Complain. Focus on your awareness to clarify what you actually want. So one of the things that I'm going to be talking about a lot today is being present and living in the eternal now. Just like when you feel triggered, you're going to stop and think about what's happening. In the midst of your complaint, you want to take a moment and say, okay, is that it? Is that everything? Is this really what I'm tripping off of, or is it something else? Have I said everything that I needed to say? Because I don't really want to have to talk about this again, because this is not pleasant. Let me go ahead and get it all out. Be present, be fully present. Take advantage of every opportunity you have to advocate for yourself, in other words, okay? You want to listen to yourself. The voice gets louder and louder when we're angry, okay? So just like when you're in the midst of an argument or a disagreement and you get louder and louder, the madder you get, that's how the body is. Remember all the things that precede anger: confusion, irritation, etc. So by the time you're angry, so much has already happened. So you want to listen to yourself when you get angry, because you know at that point, now there's a disease. Anger happens when you don't listen to yourself, when you ignore your impulses and your intuition, and you let yourself be swayed against your inner guidance. Anger is not going to let you, anger will not let you get away with ignoring yourself. Anger requires you to be thoughtful and attentive and to listen to yourself, listen to your instincts and follow your intuition. When these essential pieces of information get pushed to the side, anger will rear its ugly head and demand your attention. So understand that anger is an alarm. It's a bell. It's letting you know that you're off your path. You don't have balance. Okay? So those are the things that I want you to know about anger. And per usual, I know there's a lot of information that I'm giving you. We will have one sheets, which are beautifully designed grimoire entries that you can print out and put in a binder or put in your grimoire if you feel it applies, or just keep and refer back to as you are working on your healing and your evolution. And so those will be available, and you can make your love offerings for those. Make sure that you put your email address in the memo section. Mandra Shola isn't here to say that, so I just want to make sure I told y'all that before I forgot. Okay, so we're going to move right on to depression. That's the number 2 most common dis-ease that I encounter in my practice: depression. And for the Black woman in particular, I'm going to call this brokenheartedness. Y'all know the number 1 killer of Black women? It's not breast cancer. It's not HIV. It's not Black men. It is heart dis-ease. Brokenheartedness kills more Black women than any other thing on the planet. And they call it the silent killer. But as we just spoke about, we know that it's not silent. We know that it is repressed. We know that it is a killer that we give the password to our accounts, the keys to our house and our heart. We set up a room for the killer. We keep them warm and safe, way down deep, and we let them stay there until they kill us. That's what Black women do. And everything that reminds us of the killer, everything that smells like him, looks like him, talks and walks like him, or reminds us in any way, we wrap them up and throw them in the room too. And we try our best to never open that door. And that is why heart dis-ease kills more Black women than any other thing. We have got to start crying out when we are in pain. We have got to start speaking our truth and talking about our pain. We have got to start recognizing what triggers us instead of allowing people to constantly pull our trigger. We have to find our triggers and eliminate them. Brokenheartedness is killing Black women. Disappointment is killing Black women. And you should never be disappointed in another person, because you should never have expectations, because you don't know what a motherfucker will do. And y'all know that. You can't expect anything from anybody. Disappointment is your fault. I'm getting off topic. Let's talk about depression. Suffering in silence. not asking for help. These are causes of depression. And oftentimes this is the result of grief. And I'm not talking about grief just because of the loss of life. I'm talking about grieving. Oh, you guys, my heart is just feeling so heavy right now because I'm feeling your hearts and I'm remembering the conversations that I have and that I've had. And Black women, we're so disappointed. We grieve. Whew. We're so disappointed. We're disappointed with ourselves for not being stronger because we're taught and told that we have to be strong, that you got to do it by yourself, that you can't count on anybody. And we're disappointed when we fall short of those goals that we set for ourselves that are impossible for anybody to achieve. We're disappointed by the men that we choose that love us and leave us. We're disappointed by the children that we create and pour into, and then they grow up and they do things other than what we raised them to do. We're disappointed by a society that we hold up on our backs. Zora Neale Hurston said, the Black woman is the mule of the world. We have washed clothes and cooked food and suckled babies and planted crops and harvested them and invented things and healed. And we've done all of this shit for all of these different societies for all of these years, hundreds, if not thousands of years. But let's talk about the diaspora. We've done all of this shit and still nobody hears us. Nobody hears us. Nobody cares about us. They kill us. They rape us. They ignore us. They pay us less. They let us die in jail cells alone like Sandra Bland. They harvest our fucking cells and experiment on them like Henrietta Lack. They cut off our pussies and our asses and put them in jars and put them in museums like Hottentot Venus. We are hurt. Those are our ancestors. Those are our sisters. Those are you and me. And we are hurt. We are brokenhearted. We are mad as a motherfucker. We are diseased. But we have to start talking about that. We got to talk about it. We have to release it. Or we're going to continue to die of heart disease. And we're going to continue to fail to reach our potential. And we're going to continue to be too far to the right or too far to the left. Either way, out of alignment with what we came here to do and who we came here to be, because we're allowing other people to influence us and take us off our path. It's possible for us to acknowledge what we've been through as a race of women, as a race of people. We can acknowledge that and we can address it without allowing it to consume us or to take space in our hearts and our bodies and fester and kill us. And that's what we need to do. We need to address it. But more importantly, when those atrocities, because they're still happening, when they begin to happen to us, even on a minor scale, when you're in a meeting at work and someone interrupts you, the time to address it is right then. When someone hurts you or disrespects you, the time to address it is in that moment. All you have is now. You don't wait for another time. My grandmother used to always say, in the cool of the evening, in the cool of the evening. You don't know if it's going to be cool this evening. You don't know if you're going to have that opportunity. You address it right then and there. This will prevent some of the depression. Think about what the word means, you guys. Depression means to push down, to indent. Why are you depressed? Because you're pushing shit down into your heart and into your spirits. You're not dealing with it. You're packing it away. That's what depression is. Let it out. Fear. Fear is another key element of depression. Fears that are deep and constant. And this is particularly true for Black women. We fear for our safety. We fear for our children's safety, especially the mother of young Black men. We're so afraid. I'm afraid. I have a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old. I deal with it. I pray over them. I utilize my resources. I know that I don't have to be afraid, but I understand where their fear comes from. And that fear, particularly as it relates to Black women and their sons, is why so many Black men in these most recent generations are effeminate. Now, I'm not talking about sexual orientation, so don't even think that that's what I'm saying. I don't care who you love or who you want to be with. I'm talking about being either masculine in your way of being and your thought process, or being feminine. And a lot of women, Black women, have effeminized our sons because we don't want them to have so much bass in their voice. And we don't want them to be cocky when they talking to white people or when they're out here in the streets, because we don't want them to get shot. We want them to come home to us. We want them to be soft and gentle. We don't want them to be the protective force that they are supposed to be. We don't want them to stand tall with their chest out and look niggas up and down when they're talking to them, because that's how you get into trouble. That's how you get hurt. That's how you become a target. And that's why our communities are unprotected. And that's why our communities are at risk for whatever, because really they could do anything to us. Most households you pull up to don't have a man in them. And if you, sidetracked. Okay, so fear, we have a lot of fear. We have a lot of fear. So you need to deal with that. Understand that fear and faith cannot coexist. They do not coexist. They cancel each other out. Fear is only a lack of faith. And understand, and I said this in other lessons, and I'll continue to say it because it is a core belief that I have, that I know to be true, a spiritual truth, that there are only two emotions that humans are capable of expressing, and that is fear and love, and that every other emotion is just an expression, a version of one or the other. Fear and love, that's all we have. Okay. And so fear then is a lack of love. It's either an expression of a lack of love or a reaction to a lack of love. Okay, I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. Jealousy. When you are jealous of someone, you are actually afraid that God, the ancestors, the Orisha, the universe itself, whomever you give power to, is favoring that person over you, which is why they have more, which is why their experience is different from yours, which is why their life is better than yours. You fear that you are not as favored as they are. That's what jealousy is. Anger. Anger is fear. We just talked about that. Why? Because you have lost control. You fear that you are no longer in control of your experience, that someone else is controlling you, influencing you, doing shit to you that doesn't feel good, that you don't like. So anger is an expression of fear. But gratitude is love. Gratitude is an expression of love. Protection, that's an expression of love. Okay, so everything is either going to be fear or love. So now we're talking about fear, which is a major component of depression. So be not afraid. You have nothing to fear. If you're doing the work that you're supposed to do, that you know you need to do, and if you don't know what work I'm talking about, book an Ancestral Life Path reading. Let's get started. Join one of the free mentorship programs. Let's get started. Join one of the paid mentorship programs. Hit the ground running. Let's get started. But if you're not doing the work that you're supposed to do, that you came here to do, you have every reason to be afraid, because the shit that must be happening to you is probably scary as hell, because it's not in alignment with what you came here to do. There's a proverb, a Yoruba proverb, and it says something like, if the rat, like if the fat rat is on its path, the cat will never see him. So you can be a big, fat, juicy rat, and there could be a hungry house cat six inches away from you. Let's be more realistic, 6 feet away from you. But if that rat is on its ordained path, just at the moment that it was getting ready to pass the cat might get distracted and look the other way, and the rat can go on to safety. That's how it works. That's why being on your path is so important. And so when bad things are happening to you, when hurtful things are happening to you, when scary things are happening to you, and you find yourself afraid and angry and depressed and all of these other things, you got to know it's because you're not doing what you're supposed to do. Because if you were on your path and doing those things that you should be doing, then you would be spared all of that torment, disorder, dis-ease, and dysfunction. Okay. And so the last thing I want to say about fear is, well, I said it, poor spiritual relationships, meaning that you don't have the relationships that you need to have with the ancestors, with the Orisha that walk with you, with a spiritual guide, like a godmother or a godfather or Ojubona, which is the assistant to the godfather or the godmother, like a mentor, someone to hold your hand. Okay. So a lack of or poor spiritual relationships can contribute to this fear that we feel. Okay. And an absence of support. An absence of support would also be another example of how fear manifests itself, or where it comes from. Not having the support that you need from from people around you. We are African people. We are community-based organisms. African people don't do stuff naturally on their own. We need a community. We look for a community. And when we're outside of community, when we no longer believe what we used to, when we no longer are feeling those people, when we're in no man's land and we're out here trying to be a lone witch, making pea jars on one day and making offerings to the ancestors on the other, when we're off balance as fuck, when we are in relationships that don't serve us, where we're being abused, but we won't talk about it and we won't say anything about it, and we repress those emotions and repress that reality, where we're in a job where we're disrespected on a regular basis, when we're in those types of situations and we have an absence or a lack of support, and that causes us to become afraid, because being alone is an unnatural place for Black people, particularly Black women. We've always been protected up until recent history. We've always lived in community. We had the protection of other women. We bathed by the river. We were raised by our mothers and our aunties. And we had husbands who were warriors, hunters, etc. It's only in the last 600 years that we have been in the desolate situation that we're in. And our DNA is responding to that. This is new for us. It has caused us to become diseased, full of fear, which leads to the things that I was speaking about earlier. Now let's talk about imagination. How does imagination figure into depression? Imagination, as it relates to depression, is when there's too much intellectual thought that goes into a situation and not enough honest spiritual analysis, prayer, and meditation. Okay. So when you spend too much time thinking with your mind about a situation and not evaluating it, everybody, please mute your line. When you spend too much time thinking about a situation, pondering it, replaying it, applying your limited wisdom to it and your knowledge, okay? But you don't at the same time apply your spiritual wisdom to it. You don't at the same time ask for assistance from the spirits who walk with you, whether that assistance be, clear sight, discernment. When you don't apply spiritual measures to a situation, your mind will run wild. I remember I used to work, well, I've worked with many Babas, but I used to work with this one Baba in particular. And I remember I called him one day because I was going through something. And I told him, I said, Baba, in my mind, I feel like this, but in my spirit, I feel something else. And he said, baby, you lost your mind a long time ago. When you became a priestess, you lost your mind. And I laughed when he said it. And I laugh every time I think about it, because every time I revisit that, it just makes so much more sense to me. You must lose your mind in order to become spiritually powerful and spiritually proficient in working and healing, because your mind is an organ, okay? It is limited to the 3D. It's limited to your body. It's like a kidney, a lung. It can malfunction. It can become diseased. It cannot work as well as it used to. You won't remember things the way that you used to. You'll forget people's names. You're going to forget verses. That's your mind. But your spirit always remains intact. It can become diseased, but your spirit will remain highly functional if only you would allow it. So you must lose your mind. Don't spend too much time in your head. Spend your time here in your Ori and here in your heart, checking in with Ogun and checking in with the warriors, the one that fights for you, that will help you through these spiritual battles, these diseases, okay? When you spend too much time in your head, you begin to imagine things that aren't even true, applying past experiences to future events that haven't even happened. That's all fucked up, right? You taking things from the past that you have already experienced and then imagining that they're going to happen in the future, which isn't even here. The past is gone forever. The future is not promised. All we have is now. You must live in the eternal now. Lies. That's another thing that contributes to depression. We choose the lies that we choose to tell ourselves about ourselves, and our actual reality fight against the truth and affect us intensely. Okay? It's like we talked about at the opening. When something is hurting you, when something is uncomfortable for you, but you ignore it and you act like it's okay. When someone's mistreating you and you know that you're being mistreated, but it's just inconvenient to address it right now, that's a lie that you're telling yourself, that you're okay with this situation. And it's going to come back. It's going to come up because it's going to create dis-ease. And your spiritual body is going to become so off balance that it's going to cry out in the form of what? Anger. So hopefully you're seeing how this all works together. So we must always be honest with ourselves. If you can't be honest with yourself, then you can't ever truly be honest with anybody else. At least be able to tell yourself, at least be able to say to yourself, that was fucked up. I can't believe I allowed that to happen. You may not have to admit that to another person, but at least be able to tell yourself, admit it to yourself. Let's not lie to ourselves, you know, at least be able to say, I could do better. I could do a lot better. I could wake up earlier so that I can spend some time by my altar. I could not buy a pack of Newports so that I could buy a couple of pineapples to take to the river. I could, you know, be honest with yourself about all things. Because why? Because the truth is always sweet, no matter how bitter. Okay. And then the past. Okay, so the past is something that contributes to depression, mainly because of acts and sins that we have engaged in the past that lead us to feeling guilty, and it affects our self-esteem. So a lot of times people are reluctant to create meaningful relationships with ancestors and Orisha because they feel guilty about things that they've done. They feel unworthy. They feel like, well, I used to be, I used to be a dancer. So maybe, I can't be a priestess. Or I used to do this kind of thing or that kind of thing. Or, I used to think like this. Or, maybe you were in a situation where you had to be violent or whatever. I mean, there's only 256 human conditions. So we're bound to have all done some of the same things. Whatever you have experienced in your past still does not deny you your birthright. And that's the beauty of Ifa, because everything that you experience is part of your destiny, even when you're out of alignment. Because guess what? Either you're going to be in alignment and you're going to receive your blessings, or you're going to be out of alignment, in which case you are destined to experience fuckery. That's what makes Ifa so beautiful. You're either going to be in alignment and receive your blessings, which is your destiny, which is your birthright, which is what has been set aside for you. So you're going to be in alignment and receive those things, or you're going to be out of alignment, in which case you are destined to experience fuckery. So everything that happens to you in your life is part of your destiny. It's part of Ifa. The beautiful thing, though, is that you get to choose. You get to choose whether you're going to walk that narrow road that puts you in alignment with your blessings, that which puts you in alignment with health and happiness and wealth and wisdom and abundance in all areas of your life, or some other thing. Okay, so those are things that contribute to depression. So the third disease that I want to talk about, spiritual disease, is anxiety. Okay. Anxiety for most people expresses itself as worry, right? Thinking about the same thing over and over again, dwelling on an issue, on a possibility. Again, I told you I was going to be constantly telling y'all today that you must live in the infinite now, okay? Because when we experience anxiety, a lot of times we are, as my grandmother would say, borrowing trouble. Okay. We are allowing anticipation about future events based on our past experiences or our imagination, like we just spoke about. You're allowing those things to mess with your mind. You're allowing those things to give you anxiety about what could possibly happen, what's likely to happen. There's no reason for you to have anxiety if you can divine. Now, I know that anxiety is a real dis-ease. It's a dis-ease of the spirit. It can also affect the mind and cause us mental health concerns. And it can also affect the body and cause us to have panic attacks and heart palpitations and things like that. I am not trying to minimize anxiety. And if you are a person who suffers with anxiety at whatever level, please understand that I'm talking about the spiritual components of anxiety. I'm not convicting anyone for experiencing it or for feeling it. I'm not shaming anyone who is being treated for it, whether that be medically or through counseling. I'm just calling a thing, like Ayanla, tells us to do. And I'm talking to you about the spiritual components of anxiety. And perhaps this understanding will allow you to meditate on your condition and your experience and begin to heal it. I have suffered from anxiety. First of all, I'm a Virgo. Virgos are just born anxious, okay? But I suffer from anxiety as well, and I have to work through it, to deal with it, to work with the resources that I have, like the spirits who walk with me and the information that I've been taught and continue to learn in pursuit of my ancestral spiritual traditions. And so that's what y'all need to do as well. But I wanted to say that because I know that anxiety is something that's more and more prevalent. And I don't want anybody to think that I'm saying if you got anxiety, you can't be no priestess, or if you take medicine for anxiety, that, there's something, deficient in you. It's a dis-ease like all of the other ones that we've talked about today, and we're going to learn how to begin to work on them. So anticipation of future events is a big component of why people feel anxious. So I would tell you to stop borrowing trouble. Just because something happened to you in the past doesn't mean it's going to happen again, particularly if you do your part and modify your behavior to prevent the same thing from happening again. Okay. Don't allow your imagination to paint pictures for you that are not real. They'll only be real if you bring them to life, if you birth them. The past is gone forever, and the future is not promised. All you have is the infinite now. So stop worrying about if something terrible is going to happen to you if it's not happening right now. That's really what I'm trying to say. Living in the now will cut down on a lot of the anxiety that you experience. Placing too much importance on other people's opinions, that's another source of great anxiety for people. Social awkwardness. What do they think of me? Am I standing right? How do I need to hold my mouth when people are looking at me? Um, just worrying too much about what other people think. The best advice I have for that is what other people think of you is none of your business. And really it's not. Other people's thoughts about you are none of your business. Who cares? What another person thinks of you has no effects on you in actual reality. Well, you could say, well, no, if they don't like me, they could decide not to do business with me, and that could affect my income, and that could make it so that I'm not able to pay my bills, and I won't be able to feed my kids, and I won't be able to send them to college, and so then the next generation won't be better than the last, and so on and so forth. And you can just drive yourself fucking crazy thinking about all the things that could happen because somebody doesn't like you. But the reality is, if that person doesn't like you, or if that person doesn't think highly of you, and that causes them to not do business with you, who cares? Because if it's in your destiny to have a successful business, you will have a successful business in spite of that person and any other person, because you're going to be on your straight and narrow path where all your blessings live, and you won't have to worry about anybody or anything liking you or patronizing you, because you will have exactly what you're supposed to have, because it's part of your blood, your birthright. Okay. A lot of times people have anxiety because they are worried about, or they have concerns about the condition of their soul. This is such a big one. The Elay that I used to, an Elay that I used to belong to was a very male heavy Elay. Like 90% of the members were males. And about 85% of those males were what we will call street guys. Okay. And these were guys who had previously engaged in street life, who were currently engaging in street life, so on, so forth, etc. If you live in Atlanta in particular, will find that there is that a lot of the EFA population here is male and urban. Okay, and so a big thing that I would talk to my brethren about were concerns about the conditions of their soul. You know, man, I did so much fucked up stuff. You know, I've done this, I've done that, I've seen this, I've seen that, I've helped this happen, I made this happen. This shit just happened yesterday. You know, that kind of stuff. What is that going to do to me? What's going to happen to me? Is all of this in vain? Or can I pray my way out of the deeds of my past? Can I cleanse myself from my past? And the answer is yes. The answer is live in the eternal now. The answer is just all one big moment. And so you did something in the past that didn't exhibit your best character, where you didn't make the best decisions, but you are here now with the ability to do something completely different. So do it. Don't worry about your soul. Your soul is eternal. Your soul is as old as the universe itself. Your soul is going to take care of itself. What you need to worry about is your spirit, which is what's powering this body right now. And this body to continue to have this experience. Okay. So you don't allow deeds of your past to haunt you. I mean, if you're smart, you won't, because there's nothing that you can do about it. The past is gone forever. Again, we must live in the eternal now.
He's probably gonna cry.
Please mute.
Cute Sam. He's so cute. He's so cute.
Oh my God.
Put your feet
How do
back.
I treat people?
Feet back.
Oh my God, will you mute? Who is that?
Yeah, go.
Janelle, please mute.
Damn. Okay. And so the next thing I was going to talk about was worries about our spiritual standing, which is still very similar to worrying about the condition of our soul. You know, we worry, what do the ancestors think about us? You know, what do they think about me? Are my ancestors happy with me? Are the Orisha happy with me? Do they like my offerings? Do they think I'm a good person? You know, they call me Osun Funke. Am I living up to that name? Am I an embarrassment to Osun, or am I doing her proud? You know, those are the kinds of things we worry about. And those are self-esteem issues, and those are rooted in fear, okay, as we talked about earlier. So, of course, and anyone who has ever experienced anxiety knows that the largest component of anxiety is fear. I would say fear and imagination. That's what anxiety is. At least that's what it feels like for me, and that's what I believe to be true. So if we can keep our imagination in check, if we can lose our minds, and we can understand that fear is the opposite of love, and that we are actually the expression of God's love, the fact that we exist, the fact that we are material and we can touch and be touched and feel and taste, and the fact that we are here in and of itself is the greatest expression of love. We have nothing to fear. Okay. Does that make sense? All right. So ways to begin to heal anxiety. I've said a lot of these are just repeats, but I want to make sure you guys can get them. You want to be present in the moment, as we've talked about, live in the eternal now, fully understand what your experience is when you have an anxiety attack. Just like when you are getting angry, understand what is happening in this moment. Why do I feel anxious? What's going on? What is this trigger? Because if we know where it's coming from, then we can know how to go get it and pull it out, right? Cut it out from the root. Be fully present, live in the eternal now. Be clairvoyant and not psychic. We want to use our natural gifts, and we don't want to embellish them with shit that we've learned from Hollywood. We don't want to apply white girl Wicca bullshit to it. We want to literally listen, hear. There's a difference between hearing and listening. I have to tell my children that all the time. Okay. We want to hear and listen. Okay. So hearing is a physical thing that just happens because we have ears. Listening is when we apply wisdom to what we hear and experience to what we hear, and we heed the advice of what we hear. So we want to use our clairs. We want to be clairaudient and clairsentient and clairvoyant, but we don't want to attempt to be psychic, okay? Because the clairs will keep you in the present. The clairs will tell you what's going on right now, what you need to know, what you need to apply to your experience right now. Clairvoyance will let you see what is important for you to know at this time. But when you try to be psychic and try to apply that shit to the future as if you could ever know all the moving parts of what God has intended for you, that's where you mess up. That's where you become detached from reality. We are not psychics, just like we are not witches. We are favored. We are highly favored. And we are little pieces and parcels of God. And so as part of that, we have gifts, spiritual gifts that will assist us in this journey. We want to pay attention to our gifts. We don't want to try to turn them into superpowers. Be clairvoyant and not psychic. Stop trying to predict what's going to happen. Find out what is happening. Live in the here and now, the present. Be ever present. And that is how you will prevent yourself from having dis-ease, disorder, dysfunction in the future. All right, so that's what I have to say about anxiety. And lastly, the last spiritual dis-ease that I want to discuss is church hurt. And I felt like I couldn't discuss spiritual diseases with a bunch of Black folks without discussing church hurt, okay? Some of you may have been born into the church. You may have come from religious families. Most Black people, practice some kind of religiosity. It's just natural for us to do so. And depending on how deeply involved you were with your church and the kind of church that you went to and the people that made up that church, you may have experienced what we call church hurt. Church is but a group of people, and people are going to be people. The Bible says that judgment will begin where? In the church, not in the nightclub, not in the whorehouse, not at the gambling house, but in the church. That's where the judgment will begin. A lot of people have experienced abuse at the hands of people in power in church, and this abuse can come in many forms. It doesn't just have to be, you know, sexual transgressions, although we know that that happens in the Black church, and we know that when it does happen, we don't talk about it. You know, it gets repressed. But financial abuse occurs in churches. There's a mega church here in Atlanta. And I used to work with a woman many, many, many years ago, who attended this church. And she told me that they had to turn in their W-2s. They had to file their W-2s with their church so that the church could make sure that they were actually giving 10% of their salary to the church. But y'all have a hard time giving me $5 or $6. But Black folks will give their W-2s to the church so that somebody can make sure that they're giving 10% of their income. To me, that's abuse. That's abuse to tell someone what to do with their money and how much of it they have to give to you. And I know what the Bible says, but the Bible say a whole lot of stuff, and y'all pick and choose what you want to listen to. But this is one that we've really settled into as a culture. You know, you got to pay to church. You got to pay to pray. Let that stuff go. Let that stuff go. You don't have to pay to pray. You don't have to spend money to speak to God. God is within you. God is around you. Your ancestors are within you, literally within your DNA. Your ancestors walk with you. Talk to them. Pray to them. Give them food off your own plate if you don't have money to set aside to make offerings. Literally give them food off of your own plate. A lot of people have this practice anyway. I have a girlfriend who practices Ifa, but a more Lukumi expression. And as she's eating, when she's eating her food, the first bite of each thing on her plate, she puts to the side for her ancestors. She shares every meal with them. That's something that you can do if you don't have the money or the ability to designate funds to buy things for offerings. You don't have to pray. You don't have to pay to pray, you guys. So if you're holding on to that, if you're afraid to get involved in spirituality, or if you don't have a good relationship with God anymore, you feel lost because you've been financially abused, or you're afraid of being so, let that go. Now, if you want knowledge, if you want to learn secrets that you can apply to your life, if you want to learn the science behind our ancestors' relationship with God, well, yes, you have to pay for that access. But don't think of it as paying money. Think of it as an exchange of energy, because ultimately that's what it is. And the reason why people leave with this church hurt and they leave feeling the way that they do is because it's not an equal exchange. I'm giving you my money, and you may give me a sermon on Sunday, but my prayers aren't working. You haven't completed the circle. You haven't taught me how to make my prayers work. You haven't taught me how to get results from the effort that I'm exerting. Must be an equal exchange of energy. If you're not getting anything usable, if you're not getting trackable results, you know, if you guys came to the town hall, the impromptu town hall meeting that we had a couple of days ago, one of the things that Hugon said was you should be able to measure your results. If you're working with BSN and you're applying the information that you are being taught, and some of y'all are being given, donated to, if you apply that information and really use it, you should be able to measure changes in your life. Judgment. A lot of people experience church hurt in the form of judgment, you know, for their behaviors and their actions. A lot of people have felt over policed, you know, they've been told who they can associate with and who they can't, they can only associate with people in the church. Their behavior is judged, their way of dressing, their way of being, and all of these things that we know happen. They're being judged. There's no room for that in Ifa. There's no allowance for that in African spirituality because you're too busy minding your own business. You're too busy walking your own path to be worried about what someone else is doing. If you're on your narrow road, doing what you're supposed to do, aligning yourself with your blessings, refining and evolving your gifts, what somebody else is wearing, what somebody else is doing, who's dating who is not going to even be of concern to you because you're going to be too busy enjoying your own blessings. Why would I care who's sleeping with who when I'm over here sleeping with my own man, the man that the ancestors have prepared for me, my divine and ordained partner that's going to help me become who I'm meant to become? Why would what somebody else is doing or who they're involved with be of concern to me? So you have to know that those people who have the time to judge are out of alignment, plain and simple. You got too much time on your hands. So we have to let that go. Abandonment is another issue that I hear from people who are recovering from church hurt. You know, they may have, you know, paid their tithes and offerings. They may have volunteered for different things in church and, you know, been part of the young people's ministry and the children's ministry and cleaned up the church and worked in the yard, the grounds of the church. They may have made themselves, you know, available in so many different ways, but then they went through a crisis of one kind or another, and then the church was not there for them. And so a lot of people feel abandoned by the church, you know, and my only answer, my only explanation for that is that, you know, we know that a lot of churches have just become businesses, you know, they've become edutainment for people to do on Sunday. So again, you have to let that go. You got to understand what happened to you. You know, you bought into a situation, it didn't work out for you. You're still here to fight another day and to do something different and do something better. Let that go. Okay. So how can we begin to heal church hurt? It's the same as every other form of healing that I've discussed for all the other spiritual diseases. We want to call a thing. We want to call the abuse, if that's what it is, right? We want to separate. And this is the biggest one. This is the biggest one that I want to say about church hurt. We want to separate the deeds of men from the character of God. Okay? When you think about your experiences at church and you think about how brokenhearted you were, how disappointed you've been in religious leaders and religious people that you've come across in the past, when you think about how ashamed of yourself you are because of things that you may have allowed to happen to you, whatever emotions you have that would classify and coincide with church hurt, I want you to understand that you must separate the deeds of men from the character of God. A man is but a man. A woman is but a woman. People can only be the best version of themselves that they are willing to develop. But God is not that man standing behind the pulpit. God is not this priestess sitting in the middle of her bed right now. God is the all. God is the creative force that's responsible for all things. God is so much more than me. God is so much more than you, but God is us collectively. And so we have to forgive and we have to move on, and we have to understand that the character of God is love and that men will always fall short. We all fall short of the glory of God. So we cannot allow responsibilities. We cannot allow experiences that we have had with people inside the church and at other elays and in other spiritual groups and this Bible study that you went to one time. We can't allow those experiences to continue to separate us from God. It just doesn't make any sense to do that. And lastly, you want to reclaim, renew, and remember your spiritual practices, the practices of your ancestors. You know, think about what it was that you really loved about church. If you stopped going, why did you go? If you were a devout churchgoer and you stopped for whatever reason, what was it that you loved? Was it the music? Then sing. Sing to God. Listen to your gospel music. Explore other religious genres of music so that you can still speak to that part of yourself that was ignited by church. Was it the fellowship? If it was the fellowship, then you need to join a coven or an elay so that you have like-minded people that you can talk to, that you can be around. Was it the service? Then find out what your spiritual gifts are so that you can serve. You can use them to serve. You don't have to give up church. Do not forsake the assembly. There are ways that you can serve, ways that you can recreate that experience, even if you are no longer Christian. Okay. So you don't have to feel lost without church. You just have to do it a little bit differently. I know this was a lot of information, went a little bit longer than I intended to today, but I hope that it's helpful for you. Again, thank everyone for being here. I hope this was a great start to next week. And I love you all truly and deeply. And may everyone have a wonderful week going forward. Be sure to include your email address in the memo portion of your payment if you are ordering items from today's broadcast. May the ancestors watch between me and thee until we meet again. Ashe.
Ashe.
Hey.
If nobody talks about you, then you are